Hey everyone, Raptorspank here, and today we have Metacheck March 23rd. And this is the show where I look at the meta and talk about some decks I find interesting and give you an update on my deck from last week's deck guide series. So, let's jump straight into that. No patches this week to discuss about. So, looking at Decisive Shurima from last week, I made a couple of changes since the deck guide that I've been playing around with myself. I've gone down a Bakai Sand Spinner, I've gone down a Siphoning Strike, I went down both Noxian Fervors, I went down a Xenotype Researcher, and I went up a Decisive. I went up 3 Iron Ballistas because I do really think that it's just a really great card for the deck and something you should definitely consider. And then I added a Rite of Negation as just kind of a neat catch-all for a lot of problems. And the deck has gone a small update, but 4-2 since the last time I played it, which was 4-1 then. So that's a 67% win rate since then. Overall, 73%, still very, very good. One trend I have noticed, I've gone 0-2 against Scarground, so that deck does seem to just be a bad matchup, but it's also hard to say because I drew very poorly into both games. Both games I drew a lot of spells, which is kind of surprising considering how much I went down spells this time around. So that was a little bit weird. I played against Thresh Nasus and I lost that game very, very close, but they had the instant level up Thresh to pull a Nasus, and then they had Atrocity to go with it, plus they had Vengeance to kill my Renekton when it was basically about to level up. And so I was able to get another Renekton, but it wasn't big enough to kill them. And they had the double 3-1 that creates Prey. So things went pretty well for them, but I could see that being a fairly bad matchup. Although Rite of Negation should make it better, but not in this case. I did play against Lysandra Trundle, beat that. I played against a lot of weird decks. Zed and Fiora, I want to call it elusive, but let's just call it combo because I don't know if it still has the elusive package, but I played against that, which was a pretty dominating game that just absolutely dumpstered them, and that was surprising because they drew all of their Fioras, so they actually drew incredibly well and still didn't have a chance. And then I played against Discard Aggro. That one's hard to say, though, because honestly, we should have lost that game. Should not have won that game. My opponent scooped. Even though they had lethal, but I think they just assumed I had a spell to kill them, and they didn't want to wait. And, yeah, should have lost that game. So, a little bit lucky there, although to be fair, my hand was really bad. I think the first creature I really got out was, like, a Renekton. I might have had a turn 3 play, but it wasn't a good one, if I remember correctly. So, drew very poorly, and still managed to get them down to 1 health, so that was interesting. Aside from that, the deck is just, it's a really good deck. My personal favorite part about it is that your average game time with Decisive Shurima is between, typically speaking, 6 and 7 minutes, regardless of whether you win or lose. So, that's a big selling point for the deck, because even Fizz Elusives, my games trend towards 10 minutes. Zoe Aphelios trends towards like 20. 14 to 20, so that's one of the things I've hated the most about the meta right now is just how long games are, and Decisive Shurima is a great way to make sure that you're going through games very quickly and you get a lot of games into a very short time period. Which I guess is a great segue into the general meta. Some things I've seen a lot of a Lucian Azir trending up, so we'll talk about that deck a little bit more later. But I've seen that trending, and I've seen a lot of Zed Fiora, which is really weird. I'm not sure why people have been playing it lately. It has not done well in my experience. I absolutely dumpstered it with Decisive Shurima, and again, they had the perfect hand. They had all 3 Fioras, they had a Zed, they had a Laurent Bladekeeper, they had a bunch of pump spells, because that's what the deck's all about, but they actually had their threats, and had multiple threats, so that even though I was able to kill threats, they still weren't able to actually lose their threat and just be all spells. They just kept having fuel, but it still wasn't enough. So I really don't know why I've seen that deck a bit. It seems really bad. It seems terrible. But I love that deck way back in Season 1, so, you know, I can't hate on it too much. Other than that, I did run into Discard Aggro, as I mentioned, which it seems like that's been trending up on a lot of people's lists. I've also seen a lot of Garen Jarvan for the Fallen, so that's a neat deck. I'm not sure I necessarily expect it to be particularly great in the meta. I feel like the Zoe Aphelios deck especially would have a good time against that, but Hard to say. But yeah, I've seen that a fair bit. Obviously, Zoe Aphelios is pretty big right now. So one big thing I wanted to do with the meta talk this week is that a lot of people have been talking about what they want to see for nerfs. So I think, why not? I'm going to talk about the top 3 cards that I want to see nerfed right now going into next week's patch. Obviously, it's too late for them to make changes, I believe. I believe they're on a 2-week schedule, so changes had to have been decided a week ago, I think. Or maybe it would have had to be decided by this Tuesday in order to have it done by next week because of the mobile version of the game. I guess I believe it's specifically Apple pushes updates back pretty far, if I remember correctly. This is something they talked about like a year ago, so I can't remember exactly what it was, but chances are it's too late for them to make changes for the patch that's coming. But what I would like to see changed. First off, the most broken card, I think, in the entire game, which is going to be a bit controversial because of where it falls in the ranking. But I actually think Aphelios is the most broken card they've ever printed. I really do, and I honestly just wish they'd delete the card from the game. But let's talk about why it's the most broken card, and why I think it's even more broken than Twisted Fate, which is, spoiler alert, the second most broken card in the game. So I want to see either nerfs to Aphelios or nerfs to Boxpus. The problem is, I don't think you really can nerf Aphelios without just like, and actually balance him without just like straight deleting him. The best you could probably do is make him like a 2/2 maybe, and then also make all of the moon weapons cost 3 mana at the very least. But Crescendom's still going to be broken at that point. A 3 mana 3/4 with Challenger is really, really strong still. But the big problem is he was designed to be a skill champion that gives you a ton of options, and so that's where the skill comes in, and he did succeed at that. The problem is, he provides so much more utility than any other card in the game, and if you can keep him alive, he's going to keep providing that utility constantly. Every second spell, you're going to get a new card in your hand, and what he does, he can cover basically anything you need. Calimbrum is great removal, extremely cost-effective removal. Crescendum is a super powerful unit if you build your deck right, and most decks I've seen are running just 3 Boxtopuses as their only 2-drop, so it's guaranteed to pull that, and that is a really good 2-drop. And then it's like, hey, if they have a huge board and they can block my super huge unit because of Veil Temple, well, I can give Overwhelm to that unit, and now they're just dead anyways. Or if I'm against aggro and they're dealing a ton of damage to me, I can grab Lifesteal and give that to one of my huge units, and now I'm back up to full. They have some huge unit I can't deal with, I can't remove, and it's gonna kill me. Oh, well, I'll Gravitum it and buy myself 2 turns. Like, it does too much. That's the problem. Aphelios provides more cards in hand than any other card in the game, even Twisted Fate, because it's very easy for you to get 2 to 3 moon weapons a turn. Like, that's how nuts it is. And let alone the fact that you have other spells to get even more of it. Aphelios was just a terrible mistake. It should never have been printed. And balancing it is just extraordinarily difficult. And it's unfortunate that he's also part of the most broken region in the game, because Targon also gives you too much value for everything it does. And this will not be the only Targon card that I mention in my 3 cards that I want nerfed. Spoiler alert again as well. But just in general, it's super hard to balance him, so I would love to see some nerfs, maybe even just remove certain moon weapons entirely, but dropping him to a 2/2, dropping Boxpus to a 3/3 that takes 2 damage, I think would be a good change as well to balancing Aphelios, and then making moon weapons cost 3 mana. That's what I want to see. I want to see Aphelios nuked, essentially, and I still think he'd be playable at all of those values. Then, next card, Twisted Fate, obviously. He's the second most broken card ever printed because, again, he gives you too much utility. He draws you cards. He deals damage to everything, including the opponent's Nexus. He stuns their best unit. It can basically deal with any kind of deck extraordinarily well, and obviously it's too easy to level him up right now. So, big nerfs I've seen people discuss, and the big things I've mentioned is that picking a Destiny card every turn seems reasonable. So, like, once you level them up, it's just whenever you cast a spell, you pick a Destiny card, and you don't get all 3 every turn. That's probably a good way to balance him. Also, he should draw 10 cards. That should be enough to make him a bit broken. In a similar vein, I've mentioned on Reddit that I think Burblefish should also go up. Maybe 8 spells seems kind of reasonable for Burblefish. So 8 spells for that, 10 card draw for Twisted Fate. If that doesn't work, then you start nerfing Twisted Fate a lot, and you probably nerf Pick a Card as well, just to make it harder for him to level up. But I think just increasing the number of cards you have to draw and then nerfing his level up version is probably the best way to deal with him right now. Obviously, does just provide too much utility, and stress testing was too much for the deck. And then finally, the last card I want to see nerfed is, this is going to be a bit of a spicy take because I don't see a lot of people discussing it, but I've hated this card since it was printed, and that's Star Shaping. It's just really busted. It provides you some of the best win conditions in the game through Immortal Fire, Destroyer, Great Beyond, and it gains you so much life at burst speed. So 5 health really undoes a lot of things. So like one of the best answers to the Aphelios deck would be going aggro, except for the fact that they have Star Shaping, which just gains them back all of their health and gives them a great second card in hand. So the best nerfs I would see here is, like, actually I think, and I'm not suggesting this is a nerf, I think there's a better way to go about it, but if you took Invoke off Star Shaping, that card would still see play. I actually think that. Certain decks that get poached on by aggro decks, I think would still run 1 copy to 2 copies of the card, even if it didn't invoke anything. That would be a massive nerf to the card, but that's just my way of thinking that it's just really broken, if that's possible, and I think that is possible. So I would like to see the invoke changed. One of 2 ways. I think either it should become a behold, where it just invokes anything, because then it's going to be highly inconsistent, so it's not going to consistently find you your win condition, but it can still possibly find you your win condition. Or you change it to be Solari Priestess, where it's invoking in that range, the 4 to 6. Because you're still going to get good cards out of it, because you're still going to get stuff like Sisters or Comet, which are obviously insane. Meteor Shower 2 is really great into certain modes, and it can also get you written in stars. So lots of good things you'll still get out of it, but it's not going to give you that crazy late-game finisher of Great Beyond or Destroyer. So I think either one of those things should happen to Star Shaping, because right now it's one of the cards that lets Targon get away with so much, because it undoes all of the progress your opponent has made against you up until that point, and then, you know, you don't need to run win conditions in the deck, because Star Shaping is going to find you those win conditions, and that is what is definitely too broken about the card, and gives you too much value for a card that's already good. So hopefully, I would love to see nerfs to all 3 of those next week. I kind of doubt we'll see nerfs to Star Shaping. I think a lot of people don't realize how much of a bad card for the game it is. But I think we will probably see nerfs to Twisted Fate. Hopefully we see nerfs to Aphelios too, and they don't just like nerf Twisted Fate and they're like, yay, we've dealt with Fizzlusives, and then we just go back to Aphelios stopping over the meta again. So hopefully we don't see that, but that's my look at the meta for this week, and then let's talk about some decks. First off being that Zoe Aphelios deck. So the list I'm deciding to look at for this is lifted straight off the top of the leaderboards, and probably one of the most ridiculous lists to look at. I'm still not 100% sold on Zoe over Twisted Fate, and if you did run Twisted Fate, then Pick a Card goes up in value, and you probably run that. But this demonstrates all of the cards I consider broken, considering Aphelios, Boxtopus, and Star Shaping all included as 3 ofs. This variant, because it's only splashing Bilgewater for Boxtopus, means you can bring in the Mountain Scryers, which is great for the Star Shaping win conditions, but it's also great for stuff off Solari Priestess, and just, there's so much Invoke in this deck that you get a lot of value off that. Obviously, 3 of Veiled Temple. When Aphelios decks first emerged, not everyone was running Veiled Temple. Most people understand now that that's a mistake. Veiled Temple just provides so much value, constantly pumping your units. Your Crescendum is guaranteed to grab Boxtopus, assuming you haven't drawn a Boxtopus or drawn all your Boxtopuses, so that's really broken. Spell Thief can randomly grab you good cards. I lost with Lysandra Trundle into Zoe Aphelios because Spell Thief grabbed Ruination, and they were able to deal with my Watchers using that. Well, a combination of Hush plus Ruination, so that is pretty strong. Other than that, it's otherwise just a great curve out. Lots of 1-drops, lots of good 3-drops, lots of life gain, so against aggro you should be fine because you have 3 Guiding Touches and 3 Star Shapings, and Solari Priestess can find you your Sisters as well, so you also have the 3 copies of the Fang. There's just so much life gain, so aggro should struggle against you. Basically, the only thing I consider very scary is Fizzlusives, because as someone who has played Fizzlusives a lot, I know I stomped over this deck a number of times using Mind Meld because they don't have a good answer for Mind Meld. But other than that, just kind of against aggro, look to curve out well, have a nice one drop into turn 3, probably Priestess to try and get Sisters. Aphelios is great too, because you can always grab Crescendum to then cast Boxtopus, so if you go like Dustbringer into Aphelios into Crescendum, that's going to be good against any deck, aggro most certainly included. And then look for things like Fangs or Star Shaping just to keep you in good shape into that matchup, especially if you can do like Veiled Temple plus Fangs, so it constantly gets bigger and bigger. That will be really great in that matchup. Against mid-range, you're just kind of looking for good threats that are going to trade well with them. Things like Crescendum with Aphelios, Fangs trades into a lot of their stuff, and then just have Star Shaping for that ultimate win condition, because most mid-range decks are going to struggle against the Great Beyond. So look for that, and against Control, similar things. Star Shaping is really great because, again, Great Beyond or Immortal Fire, very hard for Control decks to deal with, and then you can just pressure them early with stuff like Dustbringer into Boxtopus, or Dustbringer into Aphelios plus Boxtopus, or just Zoe getting you constant value. And the second deck I want to talk about is that Lucian Azir deck I mentioned, because I've seen a lot of it. I'm unconvinced on the deck, and my version's a little bit different from what I've seen a lot of people running. Some people run Cithri the Bold. I don't think it's really worth it. I think it's going to kind of mess up your hands a lot. This deck does best just going very, very fast, so I prefer a little bit better speed and better survivability. So things like Ranger's Resolve is super good in this deck, because one of the best blowouts is something like Withering Wail to kill our Dune Keepers, Fleet Feather Trackers, our Grizzled Rangers, our Valors, and all of our Sand Soldiers. So being able to give it Ranger's Resolve to get around that Withering Wail is obviously pretty backbreaking against control decks. And then just Sharp Sight to keep things like Lucian alive just seems very, very good. And I did have a really funny game with this against Zed Fiora, where I double sharp-sighted a Nazir and killed their standalone Zed. So I just love that value. I'm still not sure about the 3 Cataclysm, 1 Relentless Pursuit, or vice versa, but Cataclysm does seem reasonably strong. It's just Relentless Pursuit lets you decide attacks a little bit better. But just in general, it's either way. You want those 4 rally spells, so you just get to attack quite often, and this deck can be really, really broken. It's very, very fast when you get things going well. It can level up Lucian incredibly quickly and trigger him every single turn by using your ephemerals, so just a really, really great value deck, super aggressive. Against other aggro decks, again, just try to be fast, because we really don't have any other advantage against them except for the fact that Remembrance can be very good, because if we're able to kill one of our units and then cast Remembrance, we can potentially pull the Lifestealer, which is the best way to break the aggro symmetry. And then against mid-range, again, just try to go fast or have a lot of good value cards like Brightsteel Protector to protect whatever attacks, or Grizzled Ranger, because it'll trade with anything that blocks it, and then you'll get another great unit that trades with anything that blocks it. So stuff like that should be good, as well as stuff like Sharp Sight and Ranger's Resolve just to break the symmetry. And against control, just go fast. Look for the fastest curve you can. And again, Ranger's Resolve is really great into Shadow Isle decks where you're expecting Withering Wail. So that's the best way to go about it. Just try to go quick. Try to run your opponent down as fast as you can. And that's the decks for this week, so if either one looks interesting, you can find a link for both decks in the description below, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more Legends of Runeterra content.